Welcome back to the Airborne Lawyer YouTube channel, and you find me today at Cape Town International Airport preparing this Air New Zealand Boeing 747-400 for a 13.5-hour flight straight down across Antarctica and back up the other side of the world to Auckland in New Zealand. I'm flying this route today purely for novelty purposes. It won't surprise anyone to know that I've never been to or flown over the South Pole. In fact, I've never been to South Africa or New Zealand in real life, more's the pity. But flying this route, I suppose, just feels like going into completely uncharted territory. And I'm particularly interested to see, once I've got around to time-lapsing the cruise, how the daylight works as I go from morning up here in Cape Town down to Antarctica, which I'm assuming is going to be starved of sunlight right now, given it's turning into winter in the southern hemisphere, and then catch up the morning again once it has moved all the way around the planet to reach New Zealand. I'm used to flight simming in the busy skies of Europe and North America, but I think this flight promises to be very different to that as we head into some of the most remote parts of the globe. So let's take a look at the route, and perhaps it's no great surprise that the flight length there is pretty much a straight line from Cape Town to Auckland. There are no airways or intersections we need to follow for almost the entire trip until we reach New Zealand. All our waypoints comprise basically the various coordinates of longitude and latitude that we will cross as we traverse the 7,300 miles to New Zealand's largest city. We will be departing Cape Town via a published departure route, namely the Octet 1 Alpha standard instrument departure, so let's take a quick look at that. A few points to note here. Firstly, we're departing off runway 01, so we'll initially head north, then do a couple of right-hand turns to turn ourselves down to the south and head out across the ocean. There are very few constraints on this chart that we need to be aware of. We can just follow the route, and given there are no VATSIM controllers on at the moment, we can climb straight up to our initial cruise altitude of flight level 300 and then pick up our planned route from Octet. So let's finalise our cockpit preparations and get underway. So here in the cockpit we are almost ready to go. We've got the primary flight display all set up, we have the flight directors switched on. In the left-hand navigation display I have got the terrain radar showing. We just need to be a little bit careful of elevated terrain around Cape Town because we are very, very heavy today. So taking a look at our second ICAS display down here, you can see that we are carrying a total fuel weight of 170,000 kilograms. Sorry, that is very nearly our maximum fuel capacity. So that also has implications, of course, for takeoff. Looking down here at our FMC, our flaps will be set at 20 degrees for takeoff today. I would normally set them at 10 degrees on a regular 747 flight, and that gives us a V1 speed of 154 knots, a rotate speed of 169 knots, and a V2 speed of 179 knots. Now I've put 179 knots into the MCP ready over here. That is quite high in terms of V2 speed, so we will not be doing a derated takeoff today. We're going to use the maximum thrust that is available to us. We're also going to be turning off the packs when we line up on the runway, all to give us that extra little bit of push. But yeah, I mean, I suppose it's inevitable that we're going to be heavy, we're going to be carrying a lot of fuel. This is a 13.5-hour long flight, and we are fairly full. We've got about a 60% payload, so we are a very heavy aircraft today, and we are therefore going to be using all the power at our disposal to get this giant off the ground. So MCP all set up at 179 V2 speed. The runway heading is roughly 010 degrees. Our initial cruise altitude is going to be flight level 300 or 30,000 feet. We will no doubt step climb during the cruise. Just taking a quick look down here, we are on VATSIM at the moment. There are no controllers online, but I will switch over to Unicom, which is 122.8, so that can announce my intentions. We've got the transponder on, we've got the auto brake set to RTO, we have the seatbelt signs on as well, so all of that looks good, and we have done our ACARS login as well. Quick check on the overhead panel. Obviously all the IRS systems are on, standard by power is on auto. We've turned off external power, now running on the APU. We have turned on almost all of our hydraulic pressure demand switches. All of the fuel pump switches are on today, except for the stabilizer tanks. We'll probably turn those on after takeoff. We currently have the packs on, but we'll be turning those off in a moment, ready for engine start, but I'm not seeing any other lights of concern in the overhead panel, so I think we are about good to go. So the next step is to close all the doors, which I will just do through the FMC. Just double check. The doors display on the second ICAS, we'll arm all the doors as well. And what we'll now do is disconnect the jetway. Whilst that's disconnecting, we'll just take a quick look at our airport map. Today we're going to be taxiing out to runway 01, and we are going to be taxiing via Echo, Lima and Delta. That avoids a hot spot just around here, which is going to be quite tricky to get through since we're in a 747-400. Again, just default graphics for Cape Town and also for Air New Zealand. For Auckland International. So the taxiways may be wider, maybe a little better if in real life, I suspect, but we'll just have to deal with what we're given here with the default graphics, and we'll therefore be crossing over the runway and heading down on taxiways Lima and Delta and lining up from the other side of runway 01. Okay, so all the doors are shut. The jetway is now undocked, and we can call out the pushback tug and get underway. I'll select the engines onto the second ICAS display. I'm going to turn on the beacon, and I will turn off the air conditioning packs, ready for engine start. Okay, so we can release the parking brakes. And away we go. Farewell to Cape Town. So let's get the engines started. I'm going to do engines 1 and 4 to start with. Just starting to hear those spool up now. Now I don't know if any airlines, either Air New Zealand or South African Airways or any others, fly from Auckland to Cape Town or from Cape Town to Auckland. This could be an entirely fictional flight. Certainly the flight number is fictional that I'm using today. If anyone does fly it in real life, I don't know also whether it can be done with a two-engined aircraft. I don't know what the ETOPS constraints might be in that regard. One of the reasons I've decided to do this in a trusty old 747-400 is so that I have 4 engines for long haul. And given we are flying over the South Pole, where I'm not expecting there to be any major airports of note that we could land at and divert to in the event of a serious engine failure, I thought I'm going to go with a 4-engined quad jet. But it may be, perhaps, I don't know, and I'd be very interested to learn actually whether an A350 or a 777 or a Dreamliner is capable of flying a route such as Cape Town to Auckland right across the South Pole, and whether the ETOPS certifications are now so good as to permit a twin-engined aircraft to do a route of this length. So engines starting to hum nicely. Almost completed our pushback. I'll just wait now for the ground crew to tell us that we can stick on the parking brakes. Confirm that engines 2 and 4 are now on, so I'm going to turn on the APU. I'll turn on the hydraulic pressure demand switch, number 4. I don't know why switch number 4 needs to be on auxiliary to start with. You know, it's obviously some reason for that. Certainly in the procedures manual, I've always followed the instruction to have the 4th switch here set to auxiliary in order to facilitate the startup. Right, okay, so we'll just turn on one of the packs at the moment. We're going to turn the packs off again once we get to the holding point of the runway. And now let's confirm good engine start to the ground crew. Whilst they're disconnecting, I'll switch over to the stat page on the ICAS 2 display and check my controls. So rudder to the right and rudder to the left, then ailerons to the right and ailerons to the left, and they've centered nicely. Elevators down, elevators up, and we'll give the spoilers a go as well. Accidentally knocked the thrust levers there as I was checking the spoiler, but I think they're all okay. Haven't caused any injuries on the ground with the GSX crew, at least. Okay, so I'm just going to also check the ICAS recall, which is all clear, and the readings are all normal. So seatbelts are on, auto brakes are set to RTO, doors are set to automatic, parking brake is currently set, and packs 2 and 3 are off. I'm just reading that off the screen just in front of me here, and there are no warning messages. I'll set the flaps to 20 degrees. Just a final check through the cockpit here, but everything is looking good. Again, just looking at the radar in front of us here, you can see lots of red. That shows elevated terrain. And I know that there is quite a lot of mountainous and hilly terrain around Cape Town Airport, so we just need to be careful of that. What I'm going to do to mitigate the risk of that terrain is keep the speed fairly low on takeoff, so that we have, with full climb power, we have a decent rate of climb. I'll probably climb on flight level change to start with and keep the speed at around about 200, 210 knots, something like that, to make sure that we've got a good rate of climb and that we avoid any hazardous terrain. Okay, so let's get the taxi lights on and turn off the parking brakes, and we can apply some breakaway power and begin our taxi. That's quite a substantial bit of breakaway power there. Again, just showing how heavy we are, I suppose. Feels like we're lumbering along the taxiway here. So taxiway Echo is just off to the left, so we're going to take the next left, go straight across the runway, pick up Lima on the other side and turn right onto Delta. So I am flying this on VATSIM, there's no other traffic around at the moment, but just for good order I will announce my intentions. Cape Town traffic, Air New Zealand 1903 Heavy, crossing runway 19 at Echo, Cape Town traffic. So we have PAX 1 on at the moment. As I say, once we line up on the runway, I'm going to turn off all the packs just to give us that extra little bit of push. I'm also going to hold the aircraft on the brakes whilst I push the thrust levers forward. and check that the thrust all stabilises nicely, before then releasing the brakes and advancing the thrust levers all the way up to full power. The reason for that is just to make sure that we conserve all the runway that we have, since we've got to get up to 180 knots at V2, or 179 knots if we're going to be very precise. So this is taxiway Delta. We're just going to go to the end of this, and then we will be at the holding point for takeoff. And we're going to be taking off, as per the chart, in a northerly direction, then turning to the left. God, just noticed how much the aircraft lurched. I probably took that corner a little bit too fast there. It really leant to the right-hand side there. They're going to be taking off in a northerly direction, then turning right, and then doing another right turn and heading south. And then we pretty much just keep on heading south to southeast, I suppose, all the way straight across Antarctica, eventually coming up the other side into New Zealand. So let's get the landing lights on, let's get the strobes on, let's get the wing lights on, let's do this final tight turn. Lots of tight turns here. So you only have default graphics, so you'll have to forgive what this all looks like. It is, I can really feel the weight. It is such a heavy plane today. Feels like I'm driving a boat here. Okay, so let's turn off PAX 1. Now let's start the clock. Cape Town traffic. Air New Zealand 1903 Heavy, lining up, taking off. Runway 01, Cape Town traffic. Okay. That will do nicely. So I'm just going to hold it on the brakes, advance the thrust levers. Engines are all nice and stable. Releasing the brakes and full power.
Airspeed alive.
Takeoff power is set.
$80 knots.
Check.
Rotate. V2. Positive rate of climb.
Gear up. And away we go. I'm going to set 210 knots in Flitch. And I've now engaged the autopilot, engaged LNAV. It's a lovely view over there of Table Mountain, very nice indeed. Flaps to 10. Gear lever to the off position. And just checking again on our navigation display on the left hand side, you can start to see a lot of the red disappearing as we gain height. I'm happy now that we can turn the air conditioning packs back on, so I'll put these on, 1, 2 and 3. Spectacular view there of Table Mountain. Always nice to see some of the scenery where you can. Got a no land 3 warning come up on the ICAS. I think we can ignore that for the time being. And I'm just going to increase the speed now up to 250 knots. Flaps 5. Flaps 1. So I am going to be time-lapsing sections of the cruise so that we can see as much as possible of Antarctica and also enjoy the various kind of changes in light as we go, because of course it's morning here in Cape Town. It's currently night time or late evening in New Zealand. By the time we reach New Zealand, it's going to be roughly the same time of day, I think, as it is here in Cape Town right now, except tomorrow. So we should see some rather nice changes in the daylight as we go. Hopefully we should see the full range. So through transition altitude I'm now going to switch over to standard pressure, and I will leave you to enjoy the time-lapse cruise and speak to you in, I'm expecting, around about 13 and a half hours. So welcome back to the flight and welcome to New Zealand. We are approaching top of descent after 13 hours in the air, and we are just flying along the north coast of New Zealand's North Island. If we just look over there, you can see New Zealand very, very clearly. Let's jump in the cockpit and I'll update you on where we are. Well, the FMC message to reset the MCP altitude has just appeared, so we're going to do that right now. I'm going to set that to 8,000 feet, and I will explain why in just a few minutes' time. We are 13 miles now from top of descent. We're up at flight level 390. We've had a couple of step climbs along the way. We started at flight level 300, we went up to flight level 350, and we've ended up at flight level 390. Total flight time is now 13 hours and 16 minutes. I managed to stop the chronometer midway during the flight, but I know that we took off at 10:17 Zulu time. It's now 11:33, or 23:33 Zulu time, so that is 13 hours and 16 minutes. Long flight, one of my longest of all time, I think. But it was pretty spectacular as well en route. I will obviously time-lapse it for the video. I've not seen the time-lapse yet, but I'm looking forward to seeing what it looks like going underneath planet Earth, right round the South Pole, seeing day turn into night, and then the dawn coming up again the other side. That would be very interesting to see, and it's been quite an interesting journey. I've literally never flown, either in real life or on flight sim, through this airspace before, so I'm intrigued to see what that looks like. And it's just been fun flying somewhere completely different. Okay, 1 mile to top of descent. We're just going to make sure that our VNAV does what it should do. There we go. You can hear the power pulling back now, and you can see the thrust levers coming back as well. And looking at the primary flight display here, I can see that we are descending as planned. Also, just keep an eye out here on the navigation display. This little display on the right hand side here with the pink diamond shows me whether I'm descending on schedule. So that pink diamond needs to be at the center line of that display. It's just coming back up to that point now. If it holds that center line, I'm descending as planned. I'm not below or above the glide slope from our cruise altitude. So the VNAV is finding its way there and is finding that middle line to hold all the way in. Let's do the approach briefing now. So let's pull up the approach chart. We're flying the Davy 7 Charlie star into Auckland this morning. I mean, it's actually night time where I am because I'm in the UK, so actually I'm basically living in Zulu time all the time, but it's this morning in New Zealand, so let's keep it authentic. We are currently 55 miles from Davy. This is what the chart looks like. So we need to cross Davy at or above 8,000 feet. I'm expecting we will cross it significantly above 8,000, that's not an issue. The next waypoint is Saku, which we need to cross at or above 5,000 feet. We also need to just take note of the speed restrictions, so we should cross Davy at or above 8,000 feet at a maximum of 280 knots. Then we need to get to Esnax, where we should be at or above 3,000 feet and at a maximum speed of 210 knots. Now I'm on VATSIM, but there's nothing else in the entirety of New Zealand's airspace right now. So I'm not expecting any vectors, and I'm not expecting any issues in terms of maintaining separation. But if we do get a controller come online, I'll be expecting some vectors from Esnax to our final approach fix. In the absence of a controller, I will vector myself. So from Esnax, I'm going to basically fly a downwind leg on heading 050 until I'm parallel with MRAG. I will then turn left 90 degrees to meet MRAG and join the final approach into runway 23. In fact, it's runway 23 left. So one last bit to look at in terms of approach briefing is the ILS 23 left approach plate. So let's pull that up. All looks fairly straightforward. As I say, we are flying the MRAG transition. A few points to note here. Transition altitude is going to be 13,000 feet, so we'll put that into the FMC very, very shortly. Minimums is 223 feet, so we need to put that in the PFD. Missed approach procedure is fly straight ahead, 231 degrees, climbing to 3,000 feet, and heading out to Lengu, where we'll hold for further instructions, and we'll fly at 185 knots maximum. Not expecting any issues with any missed approach procedure being required, given that there are no other aircraft in New Zealand's airspace at the moment, but we will keep an eye on it. So in all likelihood, on a missed approach, I will just climb straight ahead on 231 degrees, climb to 3,000 and do another circuit and try again. Okay, so we don't have any ATIS online right now, but we do have the METAR, which I've obtained from Flight Radar 24. So we are landing on runway 23 left. The QNH is 1021. It's 11 degrees centigrade on the ground. It's overcast, and the wind is blowing at 40 degrees at 4 knots. Now that's interesting. That actually means it's going to be the wind is going to be coming slightly from behind us, I think. It's going to be coming from kind of our 5 o'clock by my estimation. However, looking at Flight Radar 24, they are still landing on runway 23 left. And here on the Airborne Moy YouTube channel, of course, we are sticklers for authenticity, so we're going to stick with that. And we'll also land on 23 left. Thankfully though, the winds are quite light. It's just 4 knots, so in a plane this size we shouldn't expect any issues. So that's us feeling pretty briefed, I hope, on the approach. We've looked at the star, we've looked at the ILS plate, and we've looked at the METAR. Just going back to the cockpits, we are now well into our descent. We're coming through flight level we're just under flight level 200, and it's just indicating we need a little bit of drag, so I'm just going to put the speed brakes out a little bit. I'm also conscious that we have a few speed restrictions coming up soon, so I'm actually just going to put the first of those in here and start slowing up the plane, because we are going quite fast at the moment. So I'm now going to put the speed brakes out fully and help the plane decelerate to 280 knots. So let's just turn to our initial approach procedures now. So ATIS, we have just talked about the METAR. We've got the weather information for Auckland. Our approach briefing, we've looked at all the charts, so that's complete. And next on the list is to set our minimum descent altitude bug in the primary flight display. So let's do that now. Just a reminder that our minimums per the approach plate is 223 feet. So rounding that to the nearest 10, that's 220. So I'm just going to set that into the PFD. Just down here. So that will now call out minimums at around about the right point. Passing through 18,000 feet, just going to put on the wing lights. I'm also going to turn on the seatbelts now as well. We've got a little bit of cloud coming up, and we know that it is overcast. Okay, we have a fuel imbalance warning, so I'm just going to take a look at the fuel. I can't actually see any material imbalance there, so I'm not too concerned about that. We have burnt off over 140,000 pounds of fuel on our 13-hour flight today, which is pretty significant. Okay, so next on our approach procedures is to go to the init ref page and sort out our landing data. So we will do a flaps 30 approach. That gives us a VREF of 141 knots. So I'm going to line select that and drop it into the FMC there. And I can now see on the primary flight display a VREF of 30 degrees and 141 knots showing just down here. Seem to be speeding up a little bit here. Our speed dropped a bit below the desired 280. I'll pull the speed brakes in now, but now of course we're going to shoot right over 280, so let's just pull back again now. So we're now over Davy, we're now en route to Osaku, which we need to cross at or above 280 knots as well. So let's make sure the 747 doesn't get too excited and go too fast, and we'll pull the speed back a bit further. Let's go down to 260 knots now. So we're soon going to be slowing down to 210 in order to get over Esnax at the correct speed as well. In addition, of course, we're soon going to be going through 10,000 feet when we will need to be below 250. So worth slowing up now ahead of time. Okay, back to the initial approach procedures. Auto brakes we're going to set to 2. We're still quite heavy on this flight, carrying a fair payload, and we will be landing with, presumably about 25,000 kilograms of fuel, so worth having a little bit of extra braking power, I think. So auto brakes are selected, wing lights are on, seat belts are on. I'm just going to cancel and recall the ICAS system. That is again warning us of that fuel imbalance, but I'm comfortable that's not a big issue there for us to be too concerned about, so that's all done as well. Something else which we can drop in here is our transition altitude. I'll pop that into the VNAV page just here. That is 13,000. Now that means we've already gone through transition, so I'm going to switch over to local temperature and pressure now, which is 1021. And next on our initial approach procedures is flaps, which at the moment I'm not putting out because I'm well above my my minimum clean speed. So we're now taking on some of the overcast cloud, which we have heard on the weather information is hanging over Auckland right now. Of course, down in the southern hemisphere, they're heading into autumn. Whereas up here in the UK, where I'm filming this, we are heading into summer. And I'm pleased to report we've actually had some half-decent summer weather, which is pretty exciting. We had a terrible, terrible May. If you've watched some of the videos I've uploaded during May, you'll know all about the fact it's been cold, wet and windy throughout May. Except for the very, very tail end of May, where suddenly it felt quite summery. And we've had some beautiful days last week or so. About time too, that's what I'd say. So just really helping the plane decelerate. Plenty of speed brakes at the moment, because we're now going through 10,000 feet, so I want to be under 250 knots, at or below 250 knots. I've just turned on the landing lights. I'll turn on the taxi lights as well in readiness. Wing lights are already on. And because of these speed restrictions, I've actually switched us over to flight level change mode. It always feels like I'm slightly cheating putting it into flight level change. I know it's kind of a bit of a cop-out, but I just find it very, very effective. And particularly if I'm trying to stick with specific speed restrictions, it's just easier. Ultimately, the 747 is designed to be flown by two people, all big jets are. So I've got a lot to handle, so putting the different speeds into the FMC all the time can get a bit too fiddly. Also here just selecting 050 degrees and heading selector on the MCP, because once we get to Esnax, what I'm going to want to do is turn onto my de facto downwind leg for runway 23 left by turning to 050 degrees. What we can just see here, again on the navigation display in front of us, is right in front of us is the airport, and that white dotted line covered by the pink solid line is basically our runway heading. That's the final approach route in there. So if I turn to 050, I will fly parallel with that and eventually end up opposite MRAG, where I can turn onto my base leg. So we are now at 8,000 feet. I'm going to continue that descent down to 5,000. We need to be at or above 3,000 at Esnax, but I don't think we need to be as low as 3,000 feet, otherwise we're going to be scraping along for quite a while, since we've still got the downwind and base leg to fly. I'm going to reduce the speed now on flight level change down to 210 knots. Again, I'm just going to help it on its way a little bit of speed brakes. Just quickly check through stat display, which all looks fine. So now passing through minimum clean, so I'm going to put out 1 degree of flaps. And can we see the airport? I think the airport is just down there underneath the clouds. I think we can see the runway just sticking out into the water, but it is obviously quite overcast. And we're now over Esnax, so I'm going to turn to 050 degrees and run parallel with our final approach heading. There's to be another airport down there. I've never been to Auckland in real life before. I have been here on Flight Sim a couple of times, but I'm not too familiar with Auckland, so I don't know which airport that is. If you do, feel free to leave a comment. So happy with the descent profile at 6,000 feet. We're going to be at 5,000 feet shortly. We're at our required speed of 210 knots. I'm going to report my intentions on VATSIM when we are fully established on final approach. There still isn't anything in New Zealand's airspace on VATSIM right now, so I'm not going to do the full announcement of downwind, base, etc. That seems a little bit like a sledgehammer to crack a nut. So there's 5,000. Let's just keep that going. I'll go down to 4,000 now. Still keeping it on flight level change. Keep it nice and easy. Quick check on the overhead panel, make sure there's nothing which I'm forgetting up there, which hopefully there isn't. Got the correct lights on. So the next few things we need to work through will be our final approach checklist, which we'll do very shortly. There's 4,000. It's interesting actually, just looking out the window here, you can see some of those autumnal colours. Some browns and bronzy colours in the trees down there. It's pretty neat how you can fly to the southern hemisphere even on Flight Sim and it recognises how the seasons differ between north and south. Okay, let's now go down to 3,000 and I'm going to just pull back on the speed to 180 knots. 25 degrees now. And I'm going to start turning to intercept MRAG. So this is now my de facto base leg. Quick check on VAT scope shows still nothing on VATSIM in New Zealand at the moment, but as I say, I will announce my intentions when I'm on flight and fully established. Okay, let's just now go to 275, so we'll be on a decent intercept heading for runway 23 left. Now capturing 3,000 feet, which is where we want to be by the point we get to MRAG, and we're at a nice speed. When I'm coming into Heathrow, which I fly into a lot, or Gatwick, which again I fly into a lot, I can do all of this quite quickly as I'm very, very familiar with the procedures, but I do like to just take it a little bit easier when I'm flying somewhere which I'm less familiar with. And also, the weather's alright, but it's not perfect by any stretch. Just going to hit approach mode. Now the localizer is coming across. Yeah, the weather's not perfect, and in particular, we don't have great visibility here. Slightly overshot the localizer actually, but no worries, we've got plenty of time to capture it again. We are 13 miles out. I also find if I'm flying without air traffic control, where I'm going somewhere new, I kind of emulate the procedures which I might do flying into Heathrow, which I'm very familiar with. So I'm almost certain to go to about 160 knots until 4 DME, for instance, which is a standard procedure flying into London. Just helps build familiarity when actually you don't quite know where you are. So still not visual with the runway, but we certainly have the ILS in our grasp. I'll just pop that on so you can see a little bit more clearly how I'm doing in capturing the localizer and the glide slope. The glide slope is on its way in to the centre now, so I'm expecting the plane to start descending very shortly, and I'm going to now select 160 knots. We have just 10 miles to go. Flaps to 10 degrees now. So, glide slope is captured. We are now descending. I'm going to keep the altitude selector in the MCP set at 3,000 feet, because if we need to go missed, I will climb back up to 3,000 feet. The missed approach procedure requires a heading of 231 degrees, but the MCP is on 230. That's near enough, that'll be fine. So we are also in pretty good shape in the event of a go-around. What I'm just going to do is double check that the thrust limit setting on the FMC is set to GA for go-around, which is. So we are now just at 2,000 feet, so I'm going to pop down the landing gear. I'm going to arm the speed brakes, and we can then perform the final approach checklist. So, gear down and green. Flaps are on their way out. We're going now to slow up to our VREF 141. Speed brake is armed. So technically it's not quite complete. Let's just get those flaps out. Flaps 25. And flaps 30. So flaps 30 now showing green, geared down, speed brake armed. Final approach checklist is complete. I'm now going to turn off the autopilot and turn off the auto throttle, and I have control. So the Meta obviously reported a very slight wind coming from behind us, or certainly from about 4 or 5 o'clock. But actually, it's pretty calm. The navigation display not showing any wind at all, so this is all for the good. Just keeping an eye at this stage on the flight directors, circulating between looking at the speed, the flight directors, the PAPI lights, the runway in front of me, just making sure everything stays on line.
300. Approaching minimums.
Slightly above on the PAPIs, but we're on the flight directors.
Minimums.
Continue. Here we are, 13 hours and 42 minutes later, we touch down in Auckland, New Zealand. Okay, brakes are to manual now. We turned off reverse thrust. And we can take this exit. The one thing I realise I've now forgotten to do is announce our intentions on VATSIM, but there is nothing else here. So I'm going to take a view on that and say that in the circumstances that is permissible. Okay, let's bring in the flaps. Bring in the speed brakes, turn off the landing lights, turn off the strobes, turn off the wing lights. Auto brakes, we can turn to the off position. To avoid doing a really tricky turn there to the right, I'm just going to taxi down here and then just do a right angle turn to the right instead. Let's find a decent gate. There we go, gate 30. With a decent jetway, that will do. And we will now take taxiway Bravo all the way to the gate. Now, one thing I'm noticing here is that by default Prepare 3D V5 standards, these graphics look kind of fancy. These are not your standard default buildings, such as the ones that we saw back in Cape Town. There are a handful of airports I've come across like this on Prepare 3D. So Copenhagen, I think, was one, and Helsinki Vantaa is another one, where there's a little bit of extra thought gone into the design, a bit of extra effort to make it look more authentic. And it looks to me like Auckland is another. So it might be wholly unrealistic in as much as it's basically a deserted, empty airport right now on that sim. But at least the buildings are perhaps fractionally more realistic than they might otherwise be. And I have just spotted a few of the ground vehicles which indicate our gate is just up here on the left hand side. There it is, that is gate 30. Hey, look at that, it even says Auckland on that building over there. Well, we know we're here for sure now. This is a tricky little bit of taxiing here. Let's see what the marshaller does. He's saying straight on, okay. I don't think we've got another 26 metres left to run there, so I'm going to stop there and turn off the engines, call out ground power, there we are, let's switch that on, and turn off seatbelts. And we'll call out the jetway. So thank you very much for watching this very special flight sim feature length here on the Airborne Lawyer YouTube channel, and I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been really quite different for me, flying across Antarctica, going from the very bottom of Africa right the way around the other side of the world to New Zealand. It's been a very long flight, but very well worth doing, and it's been great to see a 747 decked out in Air New Zealand colours once again. If you have enjoyed the video, please do click on the subscribe button, please do click on like. If you see me do something wrong which I could improve on, please leave a comment. If there's something you particularly enjoyed and you'd like to see me do more of, also please leave a comment. And I hope to see you again soon for another short or long haul episode here on the Airborne Lawyer YouTube channel. Until then, take care and I'll speak to you soon.